Namaskara, good evening, and welcome to today's BIC Streams session, Jumpstarting a Solar Revolution, How Bangalore Can Show the Way. Bangalore has the potential to become the first truly solar city in India, if not the world. Sustainable energy for all is an essential part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This session will introduce an initiative by a Center for the Study of Science, Technology and Policy, CSTEP, that has mapped the solar energy potential of Bangalore to help jumpstart the process of large-scale rooftop photovoltaic systems, RTPV for short, adoption in the city. This study is the first step to aid residents, planners, and policymakers to make decisions on harnessing solar energy from their rooftops of their homes, offices, and public buildings. This presentation by Jai Asundi of CSTEP will cover technical aspects that are associated with installing RTVP systems and explain some of the regulations and schemes currently in place and new policy directions that will facilitate a transition to sustainable forms of energy. This session is in collaboration with Center for the Study of Science, Technology and Policy. And we are glad to have Jay do this presentation with us. And now over to Jay.
Good evening, everyone. Namaskara, and thank you, Bangalore International Center, for hosting me, and thank you, Lekha, for the kind introduction. Uh, as you know, I'm the executive director at the Center for Study of Science, Technology, and Policy, and I will just talk to you a little bit about some of the work that we have been doing and working on over the past couple of years, and something that we will continue to work on. So if I may, I'll just start with my presentation and share it. Lekha, can you confirm that it is visible to everyone?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so good evening again, everyone, and welcome to this presentation. So I'll just give you a one-slide brief on what CSTEP is. It's the Center for Study of Science, Technology, and Policy. We're a science and technology-based think tank working in the areas of climate, energy, uh, artificial intelligence for good, materials, strategic studies, computational tools, anything to do with science and technology and society. Our mission is to essentially enrich policy making with innovative approaches using science and technology for a sustainable, secure, and inclusive society. So this initiative of ours is an example of what we would like to call under innovative approaches. And I would be very happy to take questions from the audience after this talk. So let's start with the basic premise. I think I believe everybody here is very aware of the solar energy problem, I call it, because, as you know, India's renewable energy commitment we made that we will install about 175 gigawatts of renewable energy by 21-22, out of which we said the solar component or the solar PV component will be almost 100 gigawatts by 2022. Actually, there was a solar thermal component which actually we've let go and said we will do PV mostly, and out of which you will be pretty happy to note that we've reached about 40 gigawatts. That's the current installation. We've got a year to go to put 60. I don't know if we'll be able to achieve that, but that's where we are. Now, within this, there is a RTPV target of almost 40 gigawatts. And sad to say that our current RTPV installations in the country is only at the level of 5.5 gigawatts. So what would it take, the question that we have, and this is the solar energy problem, what would it take to enhance RTPV contributions, right? So that's where we currently are. And this brings us to the question of why do we even care, right? Why RTPV? Why do we even care? And why do we care for decentralized renewable energy? Let's start with the first thing that everyone talks about, especially people who are in the field of environment and ecology. Land availability is always a concern, right? On one hand, you have the entire food versus fuel debate. I mean, something that we did, we had this debate when we were going through biofuels. The question was, are we going to turn our agricultural land into land where we're going to now have these PV panels, and that's what we're going to produce from there. So there is this constant food versus fuel debate. At the same time, there is also this entire ecology versus environment concerns. One is that we say that, in most of our exercises, we say we will install large photovoltaics on wastelands, but they also happen to be grasslands. And a lot of ecologists will tell you that grasslands are not wastelands. Let's not conflate the two. Grasslands are actually very important for the ecosystem, and it's not necessary that everything has to be a forest with trees, but it could also be these grasslands where you have grasses growing on that. The second thing is also, a lot of people talk about installing photovoltaic panels on water bodies. While it's a good idea in some places, you do also have environmental concerns or ecological concerns, especially if you've got fauna that are growing in these water bodies. You want to make sure that there is uh, phytoplankton and fish growing in some of these places. So you got to be really careful. And last but not the least, when you install these large photovoltaic systems, you have to now ship the power from where it was generated to where it is being consumed, which is normally cities like Bangalore or Hubli Dharwad, big cities in Karnataka, big cities in India. And when you have these power cables, you are now going through regions, you might go through places where there are endangered species. There was a big article in the Hindu recently which talked about this problem in Rajasthan, where the great Indian bustard, is endangered, and it could the renewable energy transmission lines could create a problem. There was an article in the New York Times also that talked about this. So again, you do have these ecological environmental concerns. And this is where we do believe that rooftop photovoltaic is one way of overcoming. I mean, you may not eliminate it completely, but you could overcome a significant amount of supply from these large mega power plants or of solar power plants, and do it where the consumption happens. That is where people live. So this brings us to the next problem, that if we all agree that RTPV is a great solution, the question is that what is the real problem then? So first and foremost is the uncertainty in payback, because when you are installing something on your roof, you will say that, you know what, is it worth my while? Is it worth my money? Should I be actually doing this? So the big uncertainty in payback comes from, one is the shadow from adjoining structures. You've got a large building next to you. You do not know how much of that shadow will affect the generation on your roof, and what part of your roof should you install the rooftop solar panels. So that is number one, which is the technical amount of generation. Will you be able to generate enough to deal with your needs? The follow-on case is, of course, is this idea of what is the business case, right? It's not clear what size, based on the consumption that I have, do I need to put on my roof? Am I going to put more? Am I going to put less? If I go to a current vendor, he will try to maximize the amount of revenues, or reduce his costs of acquiring a customer by maximizing the amount of panel that should be put on your roof. But you may not need all of that. So that is one big concern, and you have a problem right there. The alignment is not there in terms of getting the information from a vendor. And finally, of course, there is this issue of policy uncertainty that we constantly talk about. Do you have net metering? Do you have gross metering? Is it grid connected? Is it standalone? Those kinds of policy uncertainty definitely puts a dampener on RTPV being installed on residential roofs, or even commercial roofs for that matter. So finally, I think there is also this, apart from uncertainty in payback, there is also a lack of clarity in the process or the technical details associated with how do you go about doing it, given the fact that you're currently consuming power from the local utility. In our case, it's BESCOM. Thinking about it like we do in think tanks, we said here's a possible solution. So, one is, of course, can we reduce the cost of RTPV through the scale of operations? If cost comes down, people are more likely to take those bets and take those risks. The second is, can we come up with a way to accurately estimate the rooftop PV energy potential from everybody's roofs without actually having to go to their roofs and sit and measure it. I think if we were to try to do it in Bangalore, over 1,000 square kilometer area, it would take us the next 20 or 30 years, especially given the fact that it's going to constantly be changing. The second is also, can you produce a result that's also verifiable? I think it has to be accurate to a certain degree and be able to produce that techno-economic analysis that we would like. And I think in the solution, and I think something that I gave an interview recently is that we will have to collaborate with our local discoms, because when the sun doesn't shine, what are you going to do? You could have batteries, but it's not a very good maybe technical or even economic solution. So we need to work with our discom to figure out how is it that we can install this on our roof such that it creates a suitable business model, not only for ourselves but also for the local discoms, and then also work with them to create this clarity in process, something like a single window clearance that will allow people to say, you know what, I am going to install this on my roof, can I have clarity in terms of permissions, etc., etc. And finally, I think the solution definitely requires engagement with citizens for greater adoption and even validation, because I would like to believe that Bangalore could be the city that jumpstarts this revolution and shows the way to the rest of the country, saying that this is how we can do decentralized renewable energy. This is how we can take control of our power needs and become a sustainable city in the process. So just to come up with what specific solution we came up with, we decided that we have to do an aerial survey of a large urban space. We can do it with high resolution imagery, which will also account for shading aspects. We can, through this resolution, we can now, through our scientific calculations, come up with an accurate potential of the estimation of each and every roof in the city. And then we can inform the consumers, right? This is a part about engaging with consumers, saying that here is the answer to your problem in your house, as opposed to this is a generic solution. And then finally, also engage with the discom, and discom in this case, to aggregate capacity wherever possible, and also help them with answering some of the questions that will come up, saying that, am I going to lose my high paying customers and be insolvent in the process? So, what are the mapping technologies available? There was satellite imagery. It's very low cost because it's already been done. But the problem is that the image resolution is very low. It's still 30 centimeters above, at least the cheap imagery available. The other imagery available was aerial photogrammetry, which is through drones. Unfortunately, drones were illegal when we started this exercise. And you could actually use drones to convert your 2D images to 3D maps. So we actually did not choose this, but actually thought of it as something that we could be using in the future. And that's the innovation that will come up in consequent study. So what did we do? We use something called airborne light detection and ranging, or LiDAR for that matter. And this is our solution. So give me a minute to explain this particular slide. I will also, I could go through a video, but maybe in interest of time, I will give you the link to the video. You can go and see it later on, but just quickly explain what's going on here. So what we do is we mount a LiDAR camera on top of a helicopter. Let me see if I can annotate and show you this. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse at all, but anyway, so the LiDAR instrument is mounted on the helicopter. It is flown all across the city. And then uh, and then what we do is we are able to, through light pulses, are able to capture what is called as a point cloud. And I will get to that. So what you do is you will be able to get a point cloud of all the surfaces that this particular instrument sees on the city. And this entire exercise could be done in a very short period of time. So here we covered an area of about 1,179 square kilometers. Uh, we use that data to reconstruct the entire city in a digital model, and then we ran a tool basically simulating the sun's movement across the day and across seasons to estimate what is the shadow free area for each roof, and if we put a panel there, how much energy we could generate from a rooftop panel. I must say that this was supported by a grant from the MacArthur Foundation, which really took a leap of faith with us, because this was completely unproven technology, unproven in the way it has been done. I don't think it has, this scale has been done anywhere else in the world. And so the idea that we wanted to develop a tool that will serve the consumer, serve BESCOM, and also serve urban planners that may want to use this data set. So let me see if, yeah, so this is, I will just play this video for a few seconds, just so that you get a sense of what is going on. It could be complicated for people who don't understand what I'm saying, but this just give you a sense of what LiDAR is all about. As you can see, the instrument is mounted in the front of the helicopter and with the lens at the bottom. It flies around. I think if many of you know Bangalore, you could try to identify whether you see your part of the city. I'm sure many of you have not seen it from this height. Uh, it's a fairly low height compared to the aircrafts that you fly in. And so this is the idea, right? So it sends these light pulses, and it captures these light pulses from the reflection uh, across different buildings, and just let it run forward. And this is what is called a point cloud image, where it basically, if you zoom in, you will see that it's not a complete image. From far, it looks like you've got the entire image, but it's not so much so. What we also do is we then stitch all these points together to get what is called as a digital surface map. On that, we of course overlay the sun's patterns, the intensity of sun, which we get from data that has been simulated over 10 years. And we simulate every hour of the day when the sun is up, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And this is one of the exercises, right? You'll see as the sun rises and it moves over the roof, uh, different objects will cast shadows. It need not be the adjoining building. It could also be the tree that's next to your house. And you will see that the shadow is different on different parts of the roof. And it can also change with seasons. As you know, the sun moves south to north across different seasons. And we use the radiation profile, and as you will see, we are able to estimate how much sunlight will fall on various roofs over a period of time. So I think I will, I think, yeah, we've come to the end of this particular video, where, just, of course, thank the officials that were part of this. Let me, yeah. So this is, so just to give you a refresher, so this is what we got from the LiDAR exercise. This is the point cloud, digital surface map, and this is also, sorry, uh, Sadashiv Nagar Tank Lake, and you can see. And if you go to the Crest tool, so this is available online now. What we did is we did the calculation, right? So we did the calculation, and many of you, I'm sure, recognize this building. And this is the building where we calculated. So we looked at the rooftop and said, okay, what is the current amount of energy they consume on a regular basis? And then we estimated how much rooftop capacity can be put. It could be more could be put, but we've optimized it for the business case. And so you will see we calculate not only how much capacity, but we also say what is the generation, what will be the total system cost, what will be the payback period, and also we will be able to calculate the internal rate of return and come up with what is the capital cost. So there are a lot more details available on the website. And this is the image. And I think all of you recognize Chowdhury Hall here, and you'll see this is the calculation that we've done. This is something that can be done for every rooftop in Bangalore that we have mapped today. So this is sort of, I'll just run through very quickly. Again, this is about 2 minutes. I'm assuming I do have some time. So this will allow every user to register their account based on their electricity bill using the RR number. They get an OTP in their email. They use that OTP to then submit. So this will prevent anyone else trying to log in on your behalf and doing this calculation. And then, of course, we want you to confirm that this is indeed your house. I'm sure you would know what your house looks like from the top. And then here we can choose the places where we feel we want to assess. You can look at your bill and say, yes, this is indeed how much I pay every month. And if you don't understand your bill, you can definitely look at the demo in the tool, and it will explain how to do that. And then this produces the answer. It tells you that this is how much you can actually generate, or this is the capacity that you can put on your roofs, and how much you can generate, what the payback period is, and also a bit of details on the capital cost, what the cumulative net savings are over this entire period of 25 years, because we are assuming the panel will last for that long. And we also give you how much generation you should expect across the year, over the months. And you will see March, April, May being the high months, and of course July, August being when the monsoon cloud, it's very cloudy, so you don't get as much generation. You can also change. You can do a lot of customizations using our tool. You can say, you know what, I don't want such a large system, I want a much smaller system, and it will do the calculation for you by telling you where is the best places on your roof to put these panels and the business case thereof. You can even say that, you know what, I don't want to use this entire area, I want to use only this particular part of my roof. You can draw that area. This here we are doing it only on two specific areas. You can draw those areas and say, okay, now tell me how much can I put on these parts of my roof, and it will tell you, okay, this is, if you chose only these two, then you can install only so much, and this is your payback period, this is your IRR, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of a brief demo for this tool. I think this is my last slide. So what we are currently doing is we are assisting the DISCOM, we are assisting BESCOM on preparing a detailed project report for almost 1 gigawatt of power, where if we aggregate that much solar energy, it's quite possible that we could get the rates to be much, much lower. Today, RTPV is more expensive than ground mounted, almost by 30%, because of the economies of scale. So I think if you aggregate, this demand aggregation could lead to more efficiencies in cost. We are also going to be doing some distribution level load flow studies. There are some technical aspects associated with that. You can't have too many rooftop PV panels on the same distribution transformer, so we have to be careful of that. And then, of course, there is this aspect of average cost of supply, where we want to make sure that the DISCOM is still solvent. It's very important that they do that, so we will do these calculations for them. And then the final one is working on what are called Resco models, where you can have an entity that doesn't own the roof, can come in and lease the roof from the roof owner, and then use that roof to generate power, and use that power to supply back to the grid or supply to the consumers themselves. So now, again, we're getting into a place where entities do not need to invest the money and just take the benefits of that. We have launched Crest for consumers and developers, and we are in the process of partnering with civil society and resident welfare associations to essentially accelerate this RTPV uptake. We feel that this is a great opportunity for us to jump this forward. So I think I may have run really fast on this, but I felt it'll be great to actually take questions and go forward based on that. So thank you very much.
Hi,
Uh,
Jay. Yeah, so Lekha, I will anchor this bit a bit. Thanks, Jay, for that presentation. At one stage you mentioned, in case somebody is not familiar, I noticed that some major energy gurus are there in the audience. I saw Mr. Guru Raja, I saw Sudha Mahalingam, she's also asked a few questions. So before we come to the questions, and I noticed that already quite a few questions have been posted, I had some preliminary questions on your presentation. The first thing that struck me, your process of LIDAR and what you've done on the rooftop, that it also set out the height of the building, or is it
Yeah,
only
it's a
the
3D
area?
map. So it's a 3D map, so you can technically get the height of the building too.
Yeah, so the first thing that struck me is it's actually a great tool to compute property tax and cross-check with the BBMP property tax system, because I have publicly gone out on a limb and said that we are collecting less than 40% of the property tax potential. That's just as an aside. Firstly, a question on terminology. Now, when you use RTPV and decentralized power energy as interchangeable, so would Cochin Airport, which has used plain land to do the solar photovoltaic, would it qualify under RTPV by definition because it is decentralized energy for the airport?
Yeah, no, no. So I think when I say RTPV, it's rooftop so photovoltaic. So it is a form of decentralized renewable energy. That's
But
the
there
way
could
I
be
would.
other forms which is actually on terra firma, like the Cochin Airport. Okay.
A good example could be a village, right? A village in rural Karnataka, which may not have the reliable power from the grid. They could put rooftop panels on, a wasteland or some place, maybe a nursery set of places where they could put that, and that's also distributed renewable energy. It's just that distributed renewable energy is a catch-all term for producing power where it is consumed.
One of the points you mentioned that to bring down cost of these art, and we are now staying only with the RTPV, one of the ways to bring it up is to scale it. So you scale the activity, cost will come down and related. Now that assumes that there'll be a fair amount of standardized solutions, but experience elsewhere has shown that you invariably need custom solutions for each rooftop, and standard solutions don't work. In fact, just as an aside, Elon Musk's Tesla is in the news because of Solar City. And one of the points that Solar City bet on the fact that you could standardize the solution and get scale. But in reality, you have to customize. Your view on the standardization versus customization.
So, you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, the vendor has to come out to your roof. He has to do some measurements, figure out where the structure can actually be put in, because, we've not done a structural assessment of the buildings when we've done this assessment. But I will just tell you one thing that a vendor told me is that this tool will reduce their customer acquisition costs, because they will not go out to a roof where there is a lot of shadow or where there is a very poor business case. So actually it saves them a lot of time and effort in terms of doing this in the first place. And many a times, we are all in the Google generation, right? We are always trying to Google what has happened to me, why is this rash, those kinds of things. Now in this area also, how does a user say that, the vendor is telling me to put 5 kilowatts, is 5 kilowatts the right number? Now this tool will help that person. So yes, it will not get away from that, but I have a feeling that this is an opportunity. It's a business opportunity for a lot of small players to come in, and it's a source of employment. At the end of the day, it's a great opportunity for people to get into this. You may not be able to get that scale that you're talking about in the way we think about, but that can happen when you look at, let's say, to be honest, all the commercial and industrial establishment in Bangalore, that itself is about a gigawatt. right? So if those guys integrate, it's a 1 gigawatt right there without talking about residential. So
And at this point of time, the policy as it stands, where does it, how would you rate it on interlinking with the grid, or is it only the local use in that same building? Where are we
no,
right
so
now?
there are a lot of entities that who have got permissions. They are already connected to the grid. They have the solar panels on their roofs. They're consuming as much, and they're even exporting to the grid. In fact, many of the early adopters are actually laughing their way to the bank right now. But of course, they paid much more for their panels. So let's also keep that in mind. Let's not think that they're made a crazy amount of profits. They took the risk and they got through. I think the policy now is there. There's a net metering policy for below 10 kilowatts, and I think the MNRE came out with a rule that's saying that net metering could happen up to 500 kilowatts, but that has yet to be ratified by the KERC, and so there's a bit of as you would call, slip between the lip and the cup right now. But I'm sure that will get sorted out and we should be able to move forward. I think with residentials, there's no question about it. I think it'll be net metering for all people in residentials, and you don't need to have expensive batteries, connect to the grid. Just the only concern will be on the distribution transformers, not too many people. So if you live in a neighborhood where a lot of people are putting PV, I think likelihood that you can put PV is going to be reduced. That's all.
Okay. It's quite also possible that area might become a heat island, but that's a different story. Just a related thing. So you mentioned about, so what would be the return on investment or the break-even years? What does your calculation reveal?
Yeah, so we've looked at these numbers and we have found that most households go anywhere between 3 to 8 years, 3 to 8 years, depending on, of course, your configuration, your how you are aligned, and also what your consumption was. If your consumption is greater, your payback is much sooner. If your consumption is already low, then your payback is going to be much longer. Yeah, so it varies. As you saw the calculations I showed you for some, the video showed for some very large buildings.
Right.
My answer to that question is, don't take anybody else's answer. Find out for your own building, because that is what's more important. It doesn't matter that somebody's is 3 years or somebody's is 10 years. Find out what the answer to your building is. And that is the purpose of this particular tool.
So Jai basically says, go out and use Crest. I think that's
Yes.
really your
Yes.
other message. Incidentally, just because you mentioned about drone, there was a drone policy that was announced yesterday. I don't know whether you had a chance to see it. Under that policy, would you have been able to use drones to do this study?
Yeah. So the new policy allows us to use drones. In fact, we are considering doing remapping certain parts of Bangalore, because as you know, Bangalore is the most dynamic city. It's changing so much. We flew in 2018-19 and we're already dated in certain areas. Some areas are pretty much fine, but there are some areas, new roofs have come up. Apparently some 2 lakh connections have been given out by Bescom, and we are looking to actually map those areas. How do we do it? We're going to do it with drones.
And quick related questions, because you did about 1,000 odd square kilometers, if I remember the figure right. What percentage of it is concretized rooftop of that 1,100 square kilometers?
I don't know if we'll be able to. I mean, I think it will be fairly large. I know there are industrial estates where there are tin roofs. That is definitely there. But by and large, most of the residentials are all concrete rooftops. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, this assessment I wouldn't know.
I'm just talking about the percentage of concretization of Bangalore. That gets spoken about from time to time.
Yes.
You
know that you don't need a LiDAR mapping to do that.
Sorry. The other thing, in terms of Bescom, you mentioned about a DPR of about 1 gigawatt. Currently, how much of installed rooftop do we have in Bangalore?
I had this number. Sorry, I don't recollect it. I give me a few minutes. I think it's in the few. It's a few megawatts. It's not very large.
It's not very large.
Yeah, it's not very.
So tell us a little bit about this DPR that you're working with Bescom. I'm assuming you have Bescom on board. So what's the broad terms of what Bescom wants to achieve, and what's the nature of the partnership between CSTEP and Bescom?
Right. So, we have an MOU with Bescom to help them popularize or take rooftop PV, because they are also very keen to take this forward. They have signed up to the MNRE scheme. And in fact, in the current year, we are planning to install, and I think it came in the newspaper also, almost 300 megawatts of capacity is what they're looking at in the current fiscal. That means by March 31st, 2022, we have to install 300 megawatts. And it's not an easy task, right? So how do we go about doing that? So one of the things that we have done is since we have all the data, we are able to aggregate where the big rooftops are, where we've got the commercial and industrial establishments who have the wherewithal to put in the money to put in the rooftop panels, and we are going to put that all in together. So it's a massive data exercise. I know you're licking your lips figuratively on the fact that there's all this data that you can do a lot more other things to it, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, is put the data together so that you can targetedly approach certain sets of people, integrate all of them. And then when what will happen with this aggregation is that if you say that, okay, this 300 megawatts, you're going to split it between 5 vendors or 6 vendors, each vendor getting about 40 to 50 megawatts. Now that is something that big vendors would want to come, and they'll be able to implement it a lot quicker than running after 200 people, each doing a megawatt, right, or a megawatt or two. So I think that's where the aggregation aspect is. And the idea is to actually, if you tender it, you also get very good prices. Everyone is competitive, and it's above the board. I think that's going to be the important part there.
Excellent. And more data is definitely welcome. I tend to be a bit skeptical. It's like this housing for all. We have had those statements for the last 40, 50 years. So, but anyway, it's something to shoot for. I mean, in terms of this 300 megawatt, let's hope that we see
Yeah,
some.
I think in this case, the difference is that the financing is already in some ways ready, right? So there is the World Bank and ADB and these institutions that have these financial products that are available. And at the same time, you also have mnre giving out all these subsidies. So I think, it's not to use, I don't like using that term, but it's that perfect storm of things coming together. You've got technical data, you've got economic, financial incentives in place. I'm very, how would I put it, optimistic that we could get something done in this fiscal year.
So in that same light, but where do you see the citizen in this journey at this point of time? In a sense, solar thermal had a reasonably high acceptance among the citizenry. So where would you rate awareness and that this is the way to go at the citizen level?
It is still low, and I think BESCOM has also been very keen to actually get more citizens involved in this RTPV. Actually, we have shown through our calculations that more citizens taking up RTV is better for BESCOM, because it reduces their average cost of supply. And if we start thinking about new demands coming in, BESCOM will have to invest less going into the future. Let's say, you buy, Ravi, you buy an electric vehicle, and now you connect your RTPV to your electric vehicle. What are you saving on? You're not reducing your spend with BESCOM, but you're reducing your spend with Indian Oil Corporation, right? Which is being imported, right? So let's keep that in mind in the grand scheme of things. I feel that there's a huge amount of demand. I mean, if we look at demand from our perspective, I think the amount we spend on our for fuel in our cars is far greater than that electricity bill that we spend money on.
So you would recommend picking up a Tesla, having a RTPV on your
No,
roof?
I'm very Indian in that regard. There is a Mahindra Verito, there is the Tata Nexon. These are two vehicles you can definitely, if you want an SUV, Tata Nexon is a really nice vehicle. So you can definitely go in for that. Of course, there's the MG, which, again, is foreign. So, I have to be very
I'm good to see you as a flag bearer for Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Absolutely, yes.
Way to go, Jai.
Yeah.
I'll not start some of the questions, and I'm going to start with Sudha, whose name I did mention earlier.
Yes, I've met Sudha. Hi, Sudha. Good to hear from you.
In fact, I'm thinking whether we get Sudha. It's actually on Lekha, if it's possible. Get Sudha to join us on the panel, because she's really a big energy authority. But meanwhile, I'll start with Sudha's question. DISCOM does not encourage customers to set up RTPV. Net metering is not beneficial to the DISCOM, while gross metering is not beneficial to the customer. So is there a metering algorithm that benefits both parties?
No, so actually, we've got a policy note. There's a policy brief on this. We have shown that net metering for residential customers. I mean, customer is a very broad term. You have CNI customers, you've got residential customers. So if you look at residential customers, we've done the calculation to show actually it works out for residential customers. And also, of course, there is this limit, right? I mean, not every residential customer will be allowed to put more than their sanctioned load on their roofs. That calculation is also there. So you're right if you look at customers as an overall category, but if you start splitting them up into different types, then there are a class of customers that actually you will benefit from. For example, if all the agricultural guys go on to solar PV,
Pump sets.
so that will make sense. So there is a way, there is a via media, there is this thing, and I think they are looking at getting some they are trying to get some commercial guys onto the gross metering system, and you're right, sometimes it doesn't make sense business wise.
Thank you, Sudha, for joining us. Sudha had another question, and then I'll ask Sudha to ask some follow-ups. Sudha had a question about disposal of solar panels and the sourcing from China and the disposal.
Yeah, no, these are all burning questions. And we are actually in a committee at the MNRE trying to look at solar PV recycling and looking at how we actually start managing this life cycle of the system. Even though we feel it's bad enough right now, it's going to get worse given the gigawatts of solar PV that's going to come in. I think there is a committee that's starting to deliberate on some of these issues, on both on technical, regulatory, as well as financial, how this will be handled. We all thought that panels will last 20-25 years, but not so much everywhere. So it is definitely a concern, and I think there are groups of people working on it. I don't think I have a solution.
Sudha, any follow-up for Jai?
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you was, you were talking about imports, whether you're importing capital goods in terms of solar panels or whether you're importing crude, it's still import. Okay. And then, of course, we are transferring huge amount of Indian money to China. That's another aspect. The third thing is, the solar panels efficiency decreases every year. You must be aware of that. So as the efficiency decreases, how much are we able to supply ourselves through these panels? That is a question also that we need to contemplate ahead. And of course, before we put in any policy, we'll have to look at the long-term impact, which is what I asked about, the disposal of solar panels, because right now, using up any material that is left in the used up solar panels, that is very little recycling. So we are going to have a huge problem because these are big, massive kind of, I believe it is what, 1 acre for a megawatt or something. That's the kind of space it occupies, is it?
4 acres.
4 acres. So if that is going to be the space, you're going to have a huge waste disposal problem. So we need to consider all these things and the long-term impact before we rush into this. Not just because in the short term it's going to benefit me. And also battery, I don't think, isolated grid unconnected solar systems are as yet viable. Battery is expensive and all the materials for battery are in conflict regions like Congo and Afghanistan and places like that. So despite our optimism, I don't think battery storage is going to be a near-term option for India. So we will have to be grid connected. It will not be isolated systems, right? So,
I agree.
So, I mean, Jay, there's a related battery question from Prabhat Mathur. He said, capacitor setup, are they replacing batteries in RTPV? What is the status currently?
I have not tracked the supercapacitors and some of this. It is seen as a viable technology, but I have not heard of anyone actually implementing it in the recent past. I'll have to check on that. Thanks for bringing it up. But I'm not aware of anything that I know of in this particular area.
Narasimha Karant asks, the challenges with the discoms will be the biggest challenge out here, or the biggest issue. And Germany, apparently 15 years ago, from what I gather from the question, I think they gave incentives by way of higher prices from solar power sent to the grid. Is a model like that viable for a country like India?
Absolutely. So this is in my view a fantastic negotiation technique. We have to tell the West that, hey, if you want us to stop burning coal, which is also in our interest, you should help finance some of these things, and pay for some of these things, and that may be a way for us to get power to our people. I mean, I think that's the more important thing, is we need to provide energy to our people to improve their standard of living, make sure that they have a decent quality of life. And I think that may be one way to do it. Yes, it will have to come from, which is what the MNRE subsidies are really all about. But I think a lot more will be needed over a period of time.
We have Radhakrishnan Nair. I mean, he's with an architect firm which tries to get people to install rooftop. And what Sudha mentioned earlier is something he also mentions, that disposal is a challenge and people are seeing poor return on investment. But you seem to be arguing that that return on investment will actually improve with lower costs with the MNRE subsidy. That's the case you're making. And would you stand by the fact that the ROI will benefit the individuals who go for RTPV? Because he's a bit skeptical.
No, the ROI is the ROI. It depends on where your building is. Location, depending on what trees you have, how much space you have, all those things. So, the question is this, see, we all, in our lives, we all make these calculations, right? To be honest with you, the car that I have, it does not, the payback period is not, given the amount I drive, it does not make sense for me to have a car, but I will still have that car. And I think this is a capital asset of a similar type. I think I would like to think of it as for at least people who have houses in the way they have, it's a status symbol. I don't think people should say that, oh no, the payback period is 8 years. That's too long. I mean, what is 8 years? I think these are obviously personal decisions, but at the same time, a lot of these can be also shaped through public dialogue or discussion that could change the way people think about it also.
Okay. Radhakrishnan Nair goes to add, actually, he says the good thing about solar panel is it will reduce cooling. And I mentioned heat island because under the solar roof, if you tend to use it as a top cover, it tends to get a little hot during the day. But he makes the point that if they cover more of their roof area, I think, then actually it helps reduce the cooling costs. Is that the case?
I'm not an architect. I will I will definitely say that that's a great angle. We should definitely pitch for that. Reducing cooling costs is one of the resilience strategies for climate change. I mean, as temperatures increase, we need to figure out ways in which we reduce our cooling burden, and this could be one of them. But I've heard of this, but we have not been able to measure anything of this sort.
There's a question from Lakshmi Venkatachalam, and she says there are obviously multiple challenges. So she says, why can't BESCOM take the lead, launch its scheme, construct these panels on a lease arrangement with owners based on, of course, the scale, size, and pooled cost. And with BESCOM taking the lead, things may be faster. And I must also mention that Lakshmi was a former, commissioner of BDA and knows the system well. So coming from a former officer, asking BESCOM to take the leadership.
Yeah, I'm sure we will try that. That's what the Resco model really is all about. But given my current sense of where BESCOM is today, I think them putting in money is looking very difficult. But I do see Resco models. That's the whole idea of the Resco model. Get an entity to do all the capital expenditure and then deal with it that way. I think EESL is one of the examples that might take this up. So yes, it's definitely possible, but how it is done specifically will have to be worked out, and that's one of the things that we are trying to work out with BESCOM on some of this stuff.
Sudha, feel free to come in and make any points while I look for the
Actually,
question.
Bescom has cut me off, so I'm going to lose my internet very soon.
Do you have a rooftop a PV panel on your roof is the
No,
question.
we did consider it for our RWA,
Okay.
and we decided against it because we felt the returns were not good enough, and we would still be dependent on errant discom like this. Our transformer keeps blowing up every now and then. And of course, grid stability, you did mention grid stability. I think that's a very deep concern for Bescom. If too many of us rush into this. So we'll have to take a considered view of this, Jay, I think.
No, I agree. I'm not saying that, we go ahead and do it, but the point is that I think if we get enough pull from consumers, there is a likelihood that Bescom is going to wake up and say, okay, we need to do these studies, because quite honestly, these studies need to be done irrespective. And I feel till this, it's a pull and pull. The more people come out and say, yeah, I want to do it, then Bescom will say, okay, for this division, let's do these studies. And, we have the wherewithal to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think this Crest is a very, very good initiative. And kudos to CSTEP and to you for undertaking this. It is, yes, I think we all need to know that there is something like rooftop PV, which we can consider. And if it suits us, we should go ahead and do it. Yes.
Thanks, Sudha. Before you drop out, thanks to Bescom. What
Right.
in fact, Jay, I must mention, there is Prem Arora who's asking in the context of Crest as to are there APIs available to use the data to create custom calculators?
No, unfortunately, I don't think we will be allowed to do that. The data does not allow us to do that because of the way we acquired the data. There were a lot of permissions involved, and I think Ravi here will know the kinds of permissions that we needed to go through with this. It was incredibly difficult, and it's unlikely that we will ever be able to expose the data in the way people would want it to be. But I don't know what is it that you would want. Let us know. We can incorporate it in the Crest website. I mean, it's public, it's free for all. I do know that there's this concern that more and more apps, but it's not an app on the phone. It is a website. You have to go to it and you use it, and it's a one-time thing. So it's not like I'm asking you to continuously be on that portal. It's just a matter of one time you do it, and once you install it, then we are done with that.
Bharat Jagannathan has a question which links with something Sudha mentioned about the grid and the load on the grid. He says that in Germany, all photovoltaic plants above 100 kilowatt are expected to the load dispatch centers, and that increases the visibility of DER systems connected to the distribution. So there's a fair amount of tech there. And this is to improve grid stability.
Yeah.
The question he asks is, will this be the case in India as we get great adoption of RTPV? The German way that discoms will also have to plan their LDCs and the like to be able to operate this in a stable manner.
No, absolutely. It's already happening, right? So I think there is this question of should it be connected to the 66 kV or the LT line? At what level, or the 33 kV line, where is it going to be connected? And I think that's the technical assessment that needs to be done by Bescom when they are looking at every RTPV installation. So if it is very small, what they will have to do is assess how much capacity is there in the distribution transformer and whether that will be able to handle that load of bidirectional flow. On the higher side, as you get higher and higher, I think they will have to be connected on the LT side and be incorporated at that level. Absolutely. There's no, which is where we talk about these studies. Everyone says, you guys keep doing studies, but this is what is needed by the entity.
Yeah. So Shankar Swaminathan says, Atmanirbhar seems to be in the air. So he says, if Jai is influential enough for the MNRE subsidy, make it applicable only to highly efficient Indian-made systems. Your take on that?
I am not influential at all, but it's a good idea. I think definitely send it over to the secretary. I'm sure they have been trying to do this domestic content requirement and things like that. But my feeling is that there's always pushback. And I gave an interview recently to Carbon Copy, which tried to talk about this. And quite honestly, I don't know the answer. On one hand, you say you want to take advantage of the cheap panels that are coming in from China. On the other hand, we've done this calculation for domestic manufacturing, and it is more expensive. No matter what we did, and some major financing is needed in order to make it cheaper. But maybe that could be one way to do it. I think Brazil did an interesting model with that. Maybe India should also consider that, at least going forward, given the amount of capacity. We will definitely have to think about domestic manufacturing. And again, that is something that the MNRE has been looking at. I think the ministry has been looking at that.
Okay. And of course, Shankar also mentions that he is part of the Bangalore Apartment Federation, which could be a useful ally in this whole exercise. Have you had any interaction with the Bangalore Apartment Federation? Because they have a lot of apartments under their ambit.
No, so this is where I will plead guilty that my team. I don't know if they've been in touch, but please do get in touch with us. Or you can send me an email and I will put you in touch with the lead of my team that is doing this kind of engagement. We would definitely want to talk to as many apartment RWAs as I mentioned in the presentation. Talk to as many people as possible to get them on board to think about it. In fact, we did a few exercises for a few, I would say friends, but people who came to us and said, hey, can you do this for me? Can you do? And so we did a few exercises to see what the calculation is for each of these places, what their demand is, and things like that. Definitely something that we could work with the Bangalore Apartments Federation.
Siddharth makes a point. Actually, he makes a point that technically good sunlight on the rooftop and the ability to do this could increase the value of the property. But the related point he makes is with our haphazard construction and zoning rules and permissioning, it's quite possible that what is looking like a good rooftop today could well tomorrow become a pretty bad rooftop. So what's your response to that concern that a high rise might come in the neighborhood and block off the view?
Yeah, my guess is best as good as anyone else. I think you have a better understanding of your area. You have a better understanding of what is going to happen next door. That's something that we cannot incorporate in our tool. I'm sorry. That is something that if we could, then we would be somewhere else.
Mr. Sambashwara Rao just has a question. You mentioned LIDAR. He says, is there a percentage accuracy to LIDAR studies?
Yeah, no. So it's actually the accuracy is within 5 centimeters. So we can the point cloud is every 5 centimeters. You can get the image. So you can pretty much identify whether it's a car or an auto or a motorcycle.
Oh, okay. So basically, Akhilesh Magal says, of great work, Jai. Again, the accuracy question, but he said that when he attempted it, he had an accuracy rate of plus minus 10%. Is there a trade-off between amount that you spend and the accuracy levels that you get in such an exercise?
Yeah, I mean, so there are always there are the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. As far as the
you're sounding like Donald Rumsfeld. So I mean, a lot of recent happenings are affecting you, Jay.
May his soul rest in peace. Yes, there is this aspect that once you install it and then you start measuring it. So we have already taken into account the degradation. We have taken into account shadow. We've taken it, but then the day-to-day variance that we will likely to see. We've tried to eliminate the big bucket items, but I do feel that there are some. I would want to know. Actually, this is something that we have not tested fully across a whole host of installations. We would like to see what the difference in calculation are. So I don't know if you've used Crest to estimate how much generation you should have got from your roof. And it'll be great if you can reach out to us and tell us how much, show us the data, because that would be very useful for us. And then we can put that out on the tool there so that people can understand that this is the kind of variation that they will see when they install the rooftop PV panel.
Right. Shankar Swaminathan mentions to your appeal saying that they will get in touch and be in touch with you. Divya Rajit just makes a point. Can grid stability be achieved by more substations? And would you know anything on that?
So grid stability will come from the type of intermittency. I don't know whether it is to do with more substations. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a question of how the load is being balanced. What is the nature of the load, and how that is being handled. So I don't know whether more substations will lead to that, but I'm not a very deep technical expert here. And I would rely on the models and the studies that we do to tell us that.
Sure. There's a last question from Bharat.
Mhm.
He says that that he's a little more curious to understand the BESCOM distribution load study. That 1 gigawatt DPR that you mentioned.
Right, right.
Can you elaborate a bit more? And if that DPR is successful, what will success look like for RTPV?
Yeah. So what we are, I mean, of course, we are looking in the initial phase, like I mentioned, 300 megawatts. That is what we want to do. So success will be 300 megawatts gets installed on people's roofs, and that's a straightforward answer there. What we really need to do is identify the suitable rooftops, and they have to be distributed in a manner that they do not overly load the distribution transformer. See, if you tell me that I'm going to install something worth 100 rupees, but I need to spend 1,000 rupees to allow you to install something worth 100 rupees, I think there's going to be a problem there. So I think identifying the suitable rooftops, there's a lot of choice. We can start doing that in a manner that we can move very quickly. Wherever the distribution transformers have spare capacity, or where you can connect to even the LT, or the feeders, that is one place where we could do the calculations to say this is what can be done, to find out where are the loads, where are the generation places, or roofs available to do that. And once we do that, we can identify things that can move much faster. Now, as distribution transformers are replaced over a period of time, they will obviously install ones with greater capacity. So then suddenly it opens up roofs that can install rooftop photovoltaic panels on that.
Okay.
I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, I think it did address it. Ashok Hatangadi, in fact, he's another expert in the in the room. So present grid connected solar RTPV is shut down when the grid fails. So you could have a bright sun, no solar PV generation if the grid is unstable. This was also seen during the California fires when RTPV users couldn't get power even during the day as the grid was down. Are there newer inverters controllers that can island when the grid fails or get unstable? So,
Yeah, so this is actually something
and
that is
Ashok is a
still,
double PhD in this space, so answer with care.
I've been hearing about this for a while. People talk about these islanding systems. I have not seen anything currently being implemented, but I think it would be the best thing that could happen. I don't know of any system that's currently in place that does that. But I do. So I'll just give you a brief overview on some of these things. The BESCOM office has a new building. I don't know if any of you have been there recently. They have a new building, and they have a new rooftop panel on top. Now, one of the projects that we did over the last year and a half was connecting those rooftop panels to the charging station that they have downstairs. And so we have a system that basically charges the electric vehicles through that rooftop PV panel, and we have a controller system that essentially prioritizes use of rooftop panel for charging of the vehicle over and above the grid. And they also have a storage, so if it's not going into a vehicle, it is going into the storage, battery storage there, and then that power will be used by the vehicle. So that's a truly renewably run electric vehicle if you charge it in that particular spot. So I'm sure these are innovations that will have to come about, and we will have to work on some of these things. This is where I think this is out of the scope of what CSTEP does as an institution. We will have to, and there are a lot of entities out there that could probably work on that.
Okay. The other, I think that almost takes care of all the questions. So just some closing issues. So the interesting thing from what I gathered from your presentation is really saying data is the first step. I mean, almost like evidence-based decision making. Now, how much of that have you seen in government, the receptivity to make evidence-based decision making? I might be putting you on a spot, Jay, but
no. So I think as much as we, to be honest, when I first got into this field, I used to feel that, we are uh, trailblazing here by, talking about evidence-based decision making. And soon I came to realize that, the evidence that we were collecting was actually also very limited. There was a lot of evidence that we were not collecting that was important to the decision. So the person looking at it from that angle will say that, what, they are not using evidence-based decision making because they are not taking into account my
Right.
analysis. But what is not being thought is that, look here, there is this other piece of information that you are not aware of. Now, what that information is, I think it's better that it becomes transparent and it's out there. So one of the things that I have come to realize, especially, we are, I would call myself more technocratic, more technical side. I've come to realize that there are a lot of these environmental and social uh, uh, pieces of evidence that are not quantitative, that I can put into a spreadsheet and start doing these calculations. So I feel that we need to uh, be I will say be humble about what we are able to produce, and I will say that I am seeing in many cases I have seen that, in some cases I have not, but in by and large, wherever we've engaged with government entities, one of the things that we have come to realize is that in the first step they try to figure out whether we have an agenda. And I think that's very important. And I think it's good that they do that, because what if I was driven by some agenda by some commercial organization? Now, CSTEP is an independent research organization. We are not funded by any singular entity. And we value our independence quite a bit. But I like the fact that they questioned our independence and tried to figure out whether we came with an agenda. Once they got past the fact that we don't have a quote unquote agenda, then they engage with us on the quality of our evidence, the type of evidence that we are bringing to bear, making sure that is fairly complete and that our analysis is robust. Once we got to that part, we were able to use. The biggest example I would like to give you is uh, in this renewable space, we developed something called the Renewable Energy Atlas, and that was used by the MNRE to site wind and solar, so wind and solar plants. I think someone did post a question on putting solar and wind plants together. Those hybrid plants were sited by MNRE using our tool. Now, I will also sheepishly say that, our tool did not take into account environmental considerations like, the things that I brought up in the presentation. So we've now partnered with another agency, that the Nature Conservancy, to come up with a tool called SiteRight, which takes into account some of these environmental and social considerations when siting large power plants, to make sure that, the power plants are not put in places that are ecologically sensitive or even would affect social order in those places. And then also the transmission lines will not be through zones where there are endangered species or ecologically sensitive zones. So, I think there is work to be done by us, as much as there's work to be done by the authorities.
Thank you, Jay. That brings us almost to the close. I have one final question from my side. I also find a lot of people have said, we admire you, Jay, we admire these steps, so you take a bow.
I'm
Now,
glad to hear that, yes.
the thing is, see, given at a all India level, 5.5 gigawatt on 40 gigawatt of RTPV is about a 12-14% implementation. What makes you hopeful about the future?
So I did talk about the barriers, right? And I think there was no solution to those barriers prior to our showing how it can be done. In fact, we are in the mode of now going to Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat and mapping a whole host of cities there. And the cost of that mapping exercise is half of what we spent in Bangalore on a per kilometer basis. So that tells you that, there is technology now, and the answer is drones, of course, that you can actually use these technologies to start jumpstarting this, right? And I call it jumpstarting it. And we have now gotten attention from the central policy makers also, saying that, okay, if this technique works, and that's why I want Bangalore to work, I want Bangalore to show the way. If it works, I think it will become the mode of operation across the country. And that's where CSTEP actually will step back and ask institutions or companies to come forward, license the technology that we have or the tools that we have to be able to take it to other cities. It could be, across I don't think a single CSTEP can do it across the entire country. I think we are open to letting it happen across the board.
And I think your belief is also shareware, and more people need to come and do this.
Yes.
I think that's the essence of your.
Yeah, I mean the tools that the coding tools, and the Crest portal, that's all will be available to whoever we can. The only thing is the data does not belong to us, so we can't obviously share that. But everything else that belongs to us, we are more than happy to share.
Understandable. So thank you, Jay. That was extremely interesting, and it brings us to the end of the presentation.
Any more information, Jai has shared the link in the chat box, and it will also be available on our website. Thank you for such an enlightening session, Jai, and for fielding these tough questions from our audience and our director of BIC, Mr. Ravichandar, who is expert in all things.
Sorry, I mean, I literally gate crashed into this. I had no business to be here because I don't think I have any competence to be an interlocutor. But I just thought that since you were listed alone, Jay, might as well, join
No,
the party.
I'm glad. I'm glad. I will tell you that that project of yours is still in my mind. We will definitely do it. We should definitely talk to the BBMP commissioner sometime and do that. I'm all for it.
Only thing, the audience won't know what we are talking about, so we'll take that offline.
Yes.
And thanks everybody for hanging in there till the end.
Yes.
And good night. Keep following BIC programs. We love having you over at the BIC sessions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I wish we could have done it live, but this is where we are today. But hopefully I will get to meet all of you sometime very soon.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.